Breaking news, the Boston Celtics have agreed to trade Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. These picks include a 2028 protected first-round pick, a 2031 unprotected first-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, and a 2030 second-round pick. When looking at a package like this for someone as hyped as Jaylen Brown, there's a lot of disappointment within the media. I've seen countless amounts of videos and articles and podcasts and statements online of people claiming that Boston was fleeced and Brad Stevens needs to be fired. But to be honest, I really believe that Boston actually just dodged a bullet by trading Jaylen Brown. Why Jaylen Brown was a must-now trade guy, we'll get into that shortly. But I mean, this is not a fleece. This is Boston making a move that will save them long-term and possibly short-term. And let me explain why. To start off, let's tackle the elephant in the room here. And truthfully, that's Jaylen Brown's financial situation. I haven't seen a financial situation so bad like this before for a player that's not even top 10 in the NBA. For a player that's about to sign a supermax like he's a number 1 option and he's not even top 10 ranked in the NBA. I don't know what the Celtics were thinking, and I don't know what Jaylen Brown was thinking besides, yeah, I'm going to fleece the Celtics. But this whole entire situation is terrible. I mean, take a look at the salary right now. This man is making an insane amount of money for someone who's not even ranked as top 10 in the NBA currently. The man just had his all-time best in points, rebounds, and assists and overall solo individual performance in his entire career, and he's not even ranked top 10 after the postseason. And I'm not disagreeing with that statement. I completely agree with that statement. But I don't agree with this contract. Looking at Jaylen Brown on July 26th is eligible to sign a supermax extension with the Philadelphia 76ers that would get him paid roughly around $71 million. And that is definitely one of the reasons why the Boston Celtics dumped Jaylen Brown down the drain. I mean, to start off, Jason Tatum already has his $71 million supermax extension for the 2029-2030 season locked in with the Celtics. And now that Jaylen Brown's supermax extension was creeping up, I can guarantee you the Boston Celtics front office had no interest in that at all. I mean, to start off, the new owner of the Boston Celtics already had to take a $1 billion loan from a private equity company to purchase this thing. If that's not a giant red flag financially for players of the Boston Celtics, I don't know what is. I mean, how is an owner taking a $1 billion loan from a private equity company in order to just buy the team? Like, hello? For someone like Jaylen Brown to have a contract this heavy, which, by the way, signing this extension would make him the most paid player in the NBA currently. So for someone of this age and this status to have that high level of a contract and be someone who isn't as high as their contract makes them look, it's a complete and total red flag. And I have no idea why Philadelphia said, yeah, we'll take that. I mean, when Jaylen Brown signed that supermax extension a few years ago with Boston, they signed him like he was a top 10 player, and he wasn't even top 20 at the time. So for me, seeing this big financial black hole, you could call it, I completely understand why the Celtics said, yeah, we're all set. We're going to try to push you out these front doors as soon as possible. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown combined took up 70% of their salary cap. For 2 players to take up 70% of your salary cap without the other 11 players, that's a big red flag. And that's the main reason why a few years ago they had to break up the championship roster, because they couldn't afford Porzingis, they couldn't afford Holiday, they couldn't afford Horford. They had to get rid of Luke Cornett. How could you get rid of Luke Cornett? How expensive could he have been? Not only is this messy financial situation affecting Jaylen Brown and the Celtics, but Jaylen Brown's potential trade value. After reading many reports from NBA insiders, it was revealed that Jaylen Brown's trade value on the trade market was drying up. And it wasn't just because of his financial situation. There's other stuff that we're going to dive into shortly, but the financial situation is a major part in that. And that's because nobody wants to pay somebody the most amount of money an NBA player can possibly make at this time in the NBA for someone who isn't the best player in the NBA. If you're going to be paid like the best player in the NBA, you better play like the best player in the NBA. And you don't. And it was so obvious that the Boston Celtics wanted to get rid of Jaylen Brown. They even reached out to over a dozen NBA teams trying to push trades after losing that Giannis trade to Miami and claiming they want a buttload of picks. It turns out some teams had no interest, including the Houston Rockets. According to NBA insiders, the head coach of the Houston Rockets, Ime Udoka, didn't even pick up the phone. A man who coached Jaylen Brown in the NBA Finals in 2022 had no interest in bringing him back to his roster. Yikes. For a 29-year-old player who's a Finals MVP, an NBA champion, an All-NBA second team, an NBA All-Star, and who's someone who finished 6th in MVP voting this past season, it is incredibly disappointing to see that this man has absolutely no trade value at all. And no, I don't mean he has absolutely zero like John Morant, but for someone of his stature, it's insane that he doesn't get more. But at the same time, when you actually look into Jaylen Brown and the whole situation around him, it makes sense. And now for the analytics, the things that Jaylen Brown hates the most. Analytics are very controversial, but for this man, they need to be discussed. Starting off, this past season, Jaylen Brown averaged 28.7 points per game, 5.1 assists per game, 6.9 rebounds per game, on 47.7% shooting from the field, and 34.7% shooting from the three-point line. That is an all-time peak in points, assists, rebounds, and that's about it. Not discrediting the man for having peaks in 3 different categories that are very vital. No, congrats to you. You stepped up and showed that you can be a number 1 option. Don't get me wrong. However, for someone who is very vocal on being a number 1 option, very demanding on the court and financially for being a number 1 option, these don't really back you up. These stats alone, they may paint a nice surface level picture, but let's actually dive into the stats that expose Jaylen Brown as someone who isn't as high and mighty as a player as he may think he is. To start off, his assist to turnover ratio. One of Jaylen Brown's biggest flaws in his game on the court is his playmaking. It is absolutely poor, especially for a shooting guard who wants to be a number 1 option and someone who is very ball dominant. His assist to turnover ratio is terrible. This past season, as a number 1 option, he recorded an assist to turnover ratio of 1.42. Now, before anyone gets on my tail, you may be saying or may be thinking, oh, well, Jaylen Brown had a lot of offensive weight for someone who had to carry this team with not a lot of offensive resources. And let me say, you're correct. The man did have to do a lot of the weight on offense. And yes, I agree. For somebody who had to carry a lot of offensive weight, you know, there's going to be some room for excuse and error. However, when you look at other players who have to carry that same amount of weights, it's not acceptable. Starting off, Luka Doncic had an assist to turnover ratio of 2.08 this past season. And even Kevin Durant had an assist to turnover ratio of 1.51. And to even back that up, you're looking at Steph Curry. Steph Curry has no help on offense. We know this. The man still recorded an assist to turnover ratio of 1.68, even though Moses Moody and Jimmy Butler were off the floor for almost half a season. Jaylen Brown is notorious for having terrible playmaking skills, and he's very inconsistent with the ball for someone who's extremely ball dominant. When you look into his shot selection, it gets even worse. This man recorded a true shooting percentage of 57.3 this past NBA season as a number 1 option. And ironically enough, this man still didn't make the top 10 best true shooting percentages for shooting guards in the NBA. And before you say, but wait, the offensive weight, Devin Booker is on that list. Austin Reeves is on that list. Donovan Mitchell is on that list. If Jaylen Brown wants to be a number 1 option who has as much offensive weight as someone like Luka Doncic who's in a similar position, there is not a lot of room for error, and Jaylen Brown has a lot of error that needs to be fixed in his game. Let's compare Luka Doncic and Jaylen Brown just to show you guys the metrics in between. When looking at this chart, Jaylen Brown loses to Luka Doncic in every single category, including usage rate. So the fact that Luka is used more and averages more points, more rebounds, more assists, has a better true shooting, has way more offensive impact, way more defensive impact apparently, and overall impact laps Jaylen Brown at least 2 times, it's not a good look for Jaylen Brown. And for Jaylen Brown, as someone to be in a guard position who wants to be a number 1 option, which means you're going to have to pass to your outside resources on the perimeter or in the paint to help get team value and to get better positive outcome for the team, not just yourself. Man has a passer rating value of 52 on this chart compared to Luka Doncic's passer rating of 77, which is in the 92nd percentile compared to Jaylen Brown's, which is in the 64th percentile. And now to compare Jaylen Brown to the actual number 1 option on Boston, Jason Tatum, there's a lot of stuff we have to look at. To start off, let's look at true shooting once again. So for Jason Tatum, his career true shooting is 58% compared to Jaylen Brown's, which is 57.1%. Jason Tatum has him beat, not by a lot, but he has him beat. And this is what shocks me. Jason Tatum's assist to turnover ratio in his entire career is 1.62 compared to Jaylen Brown's career assist to turnover ratio, which is 1.25. There's a big gap between those two, and you may be thinking, well, Jaylen Brown does more passing. No, Jason Tatum has him beat by almost 500 total assists in his career, and Jaylen Brown has recorded over 100 more turnovers than Jason Tatum ever has. Yikes. To dive even deeper, when we're looking at positive team impact here, for someone who's a number one option, usually if you pull a number one option off the floor, it's messy. I mean, look at the stats here from Curry, Braun, Giannis, and now when we look at Jaylen Brown, when Jaylen Brown has been on the floor for the past 3 seasons, by the way, the Celtics record in total has been 145 wins to 59 losses. However, in the past 3 seasons that Jaylen Brown has missed games, the Celtics record is 39-9. That should not be the case for someone who's a number one option on a team. When we look at the actual number one option of the Boston Celtics, aka Jason Tatum, the Celtics record in the past 3 seasons with him on the floor is 123 to 39 losses. Now, in the past 3 seasons where Jason Tatum has missed games, the Celtics record is 58-26. Still positive, but significantly less. That is what I mean. When you pull a number one option off the floor, there's no way your team is going to magically play better without you than with you. To back that up further, Jaylen Brown missed 11 games this past NBA season, and the Celtics went 9-2. Before anyone says anything, Jason Tatum didn't play in a single one of those 11 games. To wrap up, the big question is, what is the outcome for Boston and what is the outcome for Philly? And the truth is, for Boston, for that long-term timeline, it looks absolutely great. For the short term, it's completely uncertain. And for Philly, it's also uncertain for the short-term timeline. But for the long-term timeline, it's not looking so good. For Boston and Philly, they are both still on the second apron hard cap, which means their draft picks will freeze for the next 5 to 7 years if they don't get something moving. They can only do one-to-one person trades, and there's no room for free agency pickups. But for Boston, it looks much more positive. For a player like Paul George, who's 36, with his contract expiring in a few years, he's most likely to re-sign on a veteran cut compared to Jaylen Brown, who's 29 and has no future currently of taking a pay cut. Not only that, but a player like Paul George plays identical to Jason Tatum. This means there'll be more room for facilitators like Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, who can facilitate the ball to a perfect catch and shooter like Paul George, who averaged over 40% this past season with catch and shoot threes. In my opinion, I think Paul George will be a great fit for Boston as long as he can stay healthy. And for Jaylen Brown, it'll be a much harder fit compared to Paul George in Boston. For someone who wants to be a number one option, he has to compete for that spot against Joel Embiid, which Joel Embiid, we all know, the petty king, he's not going to give that spot up, no matter how many games he misses per season. And Tyrese Maxey, who actually has been playing like a number one option for the team this past couple seasons. And on top of that, you have that young VJ Edgecombe, who has shown massive improvement throughout his rookie season. I mean, the man opened the season with 34 points. There's a lot of comfort for Jason Tatum to be that number one option, but there's a lot of contention for that number one spot for Jaylen Brown. Overall, this trade both shocked me, but didn't surprise me at the same time. To see that Philadelphia was a team that Boston settled with, for a player like Jaylen Brown, he is extremely talented, extremely smart. I mean, the man's a Harvard professor. Nobody else in the NBA can say that. But for a man of this caliber, who has a lot of flaws, both on and off the court in multiple categories, it's sad to see that is being overcredited and then trying to prove himself that he is worth what he is credited as. But at the same time, not a lot of people have respect for that level of credit that has been casted on him by his financial situation. That's just my take. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe and have a great day. This NBA offseason has been absolutely insane. Now that we've gotten Jaylen Brown and the Paul George stuff out the way, we now need to focus on where LeBron's going to go. Every single day there's an updated whiteboard with new teams or new choices or a new top 5, and it's getting confusing to track. But in my next video, I'm going to break it down for you guys on where I think LeBron is going to land and why.